Marcia, to Christy, to Phil, Jeff, Michael, Tanya, Joanna, Julia, and Larissa. Good morning, and I'm so glad you're here. This morning's title is Hidden Identity, a Diamond in the Rough. Have you ever said or done something and you thought to yourself, who is that? Our spiritual principle this morning comes from the Eastern Orthodox teaching on theosis. We are participants in the divine nature. In the East, godliness of humanity is not a new teaching. Science of mind did not create the idea. Theosis has been taught in the church since the first century. It was 1962, and the Freedom Riders in Rock Hill, South Carolina, the late John Lewis, who became representative, was beaten. John Lewis describes the event as, "I was beaten senseless," by a man he would later learn was Elwyn Williams. Freedom Riders were civil rights activists. Spiritual activism did not start recently. The Freedom Riders rode interstate buses into the segregated southern states. There was always a team of two riders, one white and one black. Freedom Riders wanted to bring attention to and challenge the lack of enforcement of the Supreme Court's decision that segregated public buses, restaurants, waiting rooms, and terminals were unconstitutional. Remember, all people are created equal, and we're still struggling how to get that right. Some of the southern states ignored the Supreme Court's decision, and the feds did not enforce the law. The ruling outlawed racial discrimination and segregation, the Jim Crow laws, the sham of separate but equal. It's the Americans' version of apartheid. Police would arrest the Freedom Riders for trespassing, but often ignored the mob that gathered to attack the Freedom Riders. The police allowed the mob to attack the riders. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee were university students sponsored who were the Freedom Riders, and John Lewis was the national president. They practiced nonviolent resistance, also called social disobedience. Nonviolent resistance has proven to be the only successful action to change a culture. Every time we go to war, the war really never ends. If you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. Gandhi in India, Martin Luther King, and others in the US, and Jesus all taught nonviolent resistance. And I think it's actually ironic that I often see that people teach that Jesus was aggressive, a take control all-American male, all to justify their own behavior. The one incident of Jesus turning over the tables in the temple is used to show that Jesus was aggressive. It's this one exchange that is used to justify the U.S. making preemptive strikes and allows us to rationalize the situation of having a surprise attack. Jesus was clearly a pacifist. He was a social rights advocate that used nonviolent resistance, and it got him killed. He taught, forgive your enemies, do good to the people that misuse you, and the biggie, turn the other cheek. I still cannot read that clearly. We only overcome evil with good. If we respond violently, we will get back violence. Even though we think that the retaliation is justified. The police judged nonviolent resistance as criminal. They called it trespassing. And as trespassing in certain communities, the police allowed the Ku Klux Klan to attack the Freedom Riders. Elwyn Hope, his middle name is Hope. Elwyn Hope Wilson was in the mob in South Carolina on the day that John Lewis arrived. Elwyn described himself as such a racist that when he learned that the black people were going to be buried in the cemetery with his dead parents, he asked to have them moved. Elwyn said he learned racism from the crowd he ran around with. He really didn't learn it from his family. And his behavior is an example of the false self. See, under pressure, we can say and do things from the false self that hurt other people. We are defending our ego, all to protect ourselves. Our behavior can just be out of character. It's not what we want to become, and it's not the qualities or character we want to experience, but we want to protect ourselves. Now, I am not an ego or a false self basher, but I can say everyone has the potential to evolve. What the ego or the false self hates and fears more than anything is change. We will think of 1,000 things to be moralistic about, to judge others with the false self. See, we don't want to give up who we think we are, even though it may hurt someone else. We are all just diamonds in the rough. And you might remember the slogan that said, I'm not all that I should be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be. And that's a cute line, but I really don't think we change into something else. We evolve. It's the soul's evolution. Evolution is built in, it is factory installed. The spiritual evolution of the soul is the idea that human beings evolve by our design. Richard Rohr says it cannot happen until we reach the second half of life, because in the first part of life, the only thing we're worried about is impressing someone else. The image of God in us seeks to be revealed. It's called epigenesis. Belief that we are given a mind and in its original creative impulse, which has been the cause of humankind's development. The sacred text says this: it is not in your own strength, for it is God who is at work in you, energizing and creating in you the power and the desire to reveal your purpose. You are not doing this alone. But why so much conflict? Why so much conflict? How can I be whole, perfect, and complete, created in the image of God, and do and say things that I regret later? Am I fooling myself? There are two characteristics of human nature, one human and the other divine. We have a true self, the divine, and we have a false self. The true self, which we call the immortal diamond, is our hidden identity. It is given to us by God. Yes, it's in there. Stop looking at everyone else in the room. It's in you. It's the image of God in each one of us. But we also have a false self. And I will describe the false self as a lump of coal. After 1 to 3 billion years of pressure and heat in the earth, the lump of coal becomes a diamond. Have you had any heat lately? Any pressure lately? Just remember, your diamond will emerge. Hopefully it doesn't take me 1 to 3 billion years for my true self to emerge. Now, the false self is not evil, it's not bad, and it is not wrong. The false self is created by us. It is created by our soul. It is the fake self, the idealized self, the superficial self, the pseudo-self. It is a defense. It's a cape of protection to not get hurt again. See, we only have 3 responses to emotional pain: anger, fear, and shame. And some of us have created a false self for all 3. I am using the Enneagram to describe our response to emotional pain, to the hurt we develop. We create within ourselves, just like a scab on a sore, we create the false self. The soul is where the creative process allows and it inhibits the manifestation of who we really are. It's our definition of God that limits our possibilities. Within our soul, there are 9 phases of the soul, and an unhealthy need for any one of these creates a false self. The unhealthy need to be perfect, to be needed, to succeed, to be special, to need to be perceived. They just don't understand me. To avoid pain, the need to be against. Some people are always against everything, and the need to avoid. The more we allow ourselves to feel the pain of our self-abandonment, the essential qualities that we have been longing for begin to arise in us. It's the unfinished business of our childhood that brings us to resolve itself in our psyches, and our hearts begin to heal. But the good news is this: God just does not leave us here. God is in work in you, empowering the desire, giving you the energy. We are not doing this by ourselves. It is not by our own strength only. Thomas Merton, an American mystic, wrote about success in the first part of life. He said, "I have had a message to my contemporaries, and it is surely this: be anything you like, be a madman, be a drunk, be a bastard of any shape or form, but at all cost avoid one thing: success. If you are obsessed with success, you will forget to live. And if you have learned only how to be successful, your life has probably been wasted." Wow. For someone who, like me, who loves being successful, that's a hard thing to chew and swallow. The need for success to treat emotional pain is the false self. As our soul evolves and the true self emerges, we become empowered by the Spirit. It's the process of the soul's evolution. We were designed for this. The transformation happens as a result of surrender. Yes, the S word. Surrender is not a word that we like, particularly science mind people. We don't like the word surrender, but you are only surrendering to your spiritual self, the true self, the God that is in you. But can you trust yourself? Can we trust ourselves? Not the false self. If you're giving in to the artificial security of your false self, you better not trust it. But you can trust the true self. Yes, you can. It is giving up this artificial security that makes the difference. Ernest Holmes wrote about our consciousness. He says, "Spirit expresses through all individuals. No two people are alike. Everyone, yes, even you, are a unique place in the cosmos of the divine consciousness. Everyone, including the people we don't like, the people who have hurt us, at their essence, at the level of spirit, they are okay." See, we are spirit and with a soul that's being expressed in a body. And the soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. Oscar Wilde put it best. He said, be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. The soul is the container of our memory. It's the image of God we personalize. See, we share in the consciousness with God, the divine nature, by theosis. Everyone participates in the divine nature of God. See, the Eastern Orthodox retain many of their mystical teachings. Eastern people are okay with mystery and wonder. The mystical faith traditions, and what I mean by mystical are the individuals who believe in the direct communication with God or the direct encounter with God, can handle mystery because they live in trust and faith. People of the Western faith traditions most often are intellectual, trying to explain their faith. And we can argue endlessly over a word, something as simple as the, as names, as titles. So you must believe this, you must do that, you aren't if. Somehow God always looks like the people who are talking. Can you explain your awareness intellectually? Can you explain who you love and who loves you intellectually? How often have you seen someone and you say, I don't know what those two people see in each other? It's not an intellectual thing. It is the mystery that we have. God is without feeling. God is in our feelings and through our feelings. And we can't just intellectualize love. Explain to me how you love who you love. In theosis, there is a direct communication with our individual consciousness. This is the real spiritual communion. What the Quakers call spiritual communion. The divine light, the spark. The teaching of theosis is deification. Yes, the making of us divine. By an inner transformation of evolution, we are participants in the divine nature. It is our hidden identity. See, you're just all diamonds in the rough. Haven't you met someone and thought, wow, if you clean him up and put a clean shirt on him, you can take him home to meet your mama? See, we're calling this transformation, this evolution, an immortal diamond. Everyone is irreplaceable. You are an expression of God. The diamond in you is immortal. It cannot be destroyed. I am using the book by Richard Rohr, Immortal Diamond, The Search for the True Self, because it's the true self that gives us peace that is beyond our understanding. See, I don't know why I'm happy sometimes, but I know I am. Our hidden identity is this immortal diamond. We will not be satisfied until our true self is allowed to emerge. Rohr says, there are 4 splits with our reality in the false self. See if any of these are familiar. We split from our shadow, the hidden part of us, and we pretend to be ideal. We split our mind from our body and our soul, and we live in our minds. We split life from death, and we refuse to recognize that some things do end. And 4, we split ourselves from other people and try to live apart, feel superior, and separate. But once you have encountered the true self, and once is enough, you taste and see that God is good. It's joy unspeakable and full of glory. The false self will begin to fall away, all of its own accord. This may take most of our life, but We only need a look. Merton said, a door opens in the center of our being, and we seem to fall through it into the immense depths, which, although they are infinite, are accessible to us. All eternity seems to have become ours in the one placid and breathless contact. In most cases, becoming aware of the true self occurs when we just get to the end of ourselves, when we finally acknowledge to ourselves that we are self-destructive. Just turning from the false self and opening ourselves to truth opens the door. By the divine power given to us, everything we need for godliness through the knowledge of the one. God has given us precious and wonderful promises that you will share in the divine nature. Back to John Lewis, who only recently met Elwyn Lewis, his attacker from 1962. Elwyn Lewis asked to meet John Lewis on television to ask for his forgiveness. John Lewis did not remember the man. But John Lewis accepted his apology, and he embraced him and said, we are just all one. No one is separated from God. And therefore, because we are not separate, we are all in this together. But how, you may ask? How did Elwyn Lewis find his true self after 48 years? We are all transformed by the renewing of our minds. We are empowered to leave the world of the false self and embrace the true self by simply changing our mind. It seems too easy, but it may be the hardest thing that we ever do. And it may take our entire lifetime. We are obsessed with protecting ourselves from emotional pain, but we only have to take and embrace the truth. That the true self, the immortal diamond, the spark, the divine light, the Christ within is within you. It has never left you, and the true self is waiting to be experienced. And it's all by the renewing of the mind. It took Elwyn 48 years to acknowledge that he was wrong and to ask Lewis for forgiveness. So, what is our excuse? It has been said to get people to change, they must see that the change will improve their current condition. And the bottom line is this: we are transformed or we will transmit. We are either transformed or we will transmit. The true self is revealed through the renewing of the mind. The true self gives us true satisfaction and inner peace, and you finally get to be your authentic self. And I call that whole. Remember, transform or transmit. And so it is. Let us pray. And I'm praying from Ernest Holmes. There is that within every individual which partakes of the nature of the universal wholeness. And it, so far as it operates, it's God. There is that within us which partakes of the nature of the divine. And since we are partakers of the nature of the divine being, we are also divine. It reacts to us according to our belief in it. And it is an immutable law available to everyone. It cannot be restrained. Our soul will never change or violate its own nature. All the denying of it will never change it. All the affirming of it will never make it more than it is. But since it is what it is, and it works in the way that it works, it appears to each through of us by our own belief. And it is done unto us as we believe. So we will say then that in spirit we are one with God. But what of the great law of the universe? If we are really one with the whole, we must be one with the law of the whole, as well as one with the spirit of the whole. If we try to find something difficult to grasp, then we shall never grasp it, because we shall always think of it as being incomprehensible. The mind which we discover within us is the mind that governs everything, and it is the thing itself. And we should just simply recognize its simplicity. And so it is. Ashe and amen.